I write these words by candlelight, the flame trembling like my memory. Beside me lies my mother's Bible, one corner burned, the pages still smelling of smoke. Catherine tried to destroy it the day she called me mad. They said I was unfit for polite society. So my sister, the mistress of Bowmont Plantation, hid me where no one would find me, among the slaves. But secrets don't stay buried in Carolina soil. Among those she called property, I learned what freedom truly costs, and what justice demands. If you're here with me now, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because this story was never written in ledgers. It was whispered in the dark by those who remembered. If truth cost you your name, would you still speak it? There's only one Bible, one secret, one promise to break a house of lies. The carriage wheels groaned against the gravel road as the world I once knew disappeared behind me. Through the window, I saw the white columns of Bowmont Plantation rise like bones against the Carolina sky, polished, perfect, and utterly hollow. The air was thick with magnolia and misery. Beyond the hedges, dark silhouettes bent low in the cotton fields, their songs floating up like prayers that no heaven seemed to answer. Those songs were the first thing that made me tremble, not from fear, but from recognition. They carried sorrow and truth in a rhythm that felt closer to scripture than anything the preachers in Charleston ever dared to read aloud. Catherine stood waiting on the veranda in a gown the color of robin's eggs, silk shining even in the dust. My sister, my savior, my jailer, Eleanor, she said, her voice all sweetness yet sharp around the edges. You look pale, dear. The city never agreed with your nerves. She smiled for the servants, but not for me. I saw it, the calculation in her eyes, the unease in her shoulders. She had invited me here not out of love, but out of duty disguised as charity. Inside, Bowmont glimmered like a palace built on size. Crystal chandeliers, French furniture, portraits of dead men who stared down as if weighing the worth of every living soul that walked beneath them. The scent of beeswax candles and roses could not hide the heavier smell beneath, sweat, smoke, and the faint metallic tang of endless labor. Catherine pretended not to smell it. Most white people did. She led me to a guest room lined with rose, wallpaper and pale curtains that fluttered like trapped ghosts. This will be yours, she said softly, though the stiffness in her tone made the word yours sound like temporary. I thanked her, clutching my mother's half-burned Bible close to my chest. For 3 days I tried to believe I had come home. I wrote letters for her, balanced account books, spoke politely to visitors who looked at me with pity and curiosity. The house servants, Patience, Mercy, and Grace, moved around me like quiet shadows. Patience, tall and steady-eyed, carried herself with a dignity that no chain could erase. Mercy, older, hummed hymns that seemed older than the language they were forced to use. Grace, barely grown, carried life within her, and fear beneath her smile. They treated me kindly, carefully, like someone walking the edge between two worlds. And perhaps they already sensed what Catherine refused to see, that the same world that owned them was preparing to devour me, too. At night I could hear the field hands singing across the dark. Their voices drifted through the shutters and settled over my bed like a shroud of truth. Each note seemed to whisper, "You cannot live among lies forever." I would whisper back to the dark, "I'm trying." But even then, I think the night already knew what was coming. The calm before the storm never lasts long at Bowmont. Soon, the parlor would fill with guests. Soon a laugh would shatter everything. 857, one house, one secret sister. One reputation to protect. Is respectability worth a soul? The afternoon sun slanted through the parlor windows, gilding every surface in polite deceit. The ladies of Charleston society had come for tea. 3 jeweled queens of gossip and judgment. Mrs. Thornton, Mrs. Caldwell, and Mrs. Ashford. Catherine fluttered among them. Her laughter light, her smile practiced to perfection. I sat beside her, dressed in mourning gray. The widowed sister from Charleston, a story invented to keep questions small and sympathy large. The china was thin as eggshell, the tea imported, the conversation delicate as lace. They spoke of weather, cotillions, and Paris fashions. everything that floats safely above conscience. Outside, the cotton fields shimmered like a white sea. Inside, their words drifted like perfume masking decay. Mrs. Ashford sighed over the roses. Such fine blooms this year, Catherine. Truly, Beaumont's gardens are blessed. And that was when something inside me cracked, soft at first, then clear as glass breaking. I laughed. It wasn't the gentle laugh of a proper lady. It was deep, wrong, rising from a place too honest to control. The room froze. Fans stopped fluttering. Porcelain trembled on saucers. What is so amusing, dear? Mrs. Thornton's voice was brittle, sugar over steel. I tried to stop. I could not. Perfect weather, I gasped between the laughter. Perfect weather to pretend everything is beautiful, while the people who make this beauty are out there in the sun. The words escaped before I could cage them. While children are sold like horses, and we sip their sorrow in porcelain cups. Silence. Then Catherine's voice tight with terror. Eleanor, enough. But truth once spoken refuses to crawl back into its cage. Mrs. Thornton's lips thinned. Madness, she whispered, as if the word itself were contagious. The others looked away, eyes darting like frightened birds. My laughter died into shaking breaths. The air itself seemed to step back from me. When the guests left, their perfume lingered like accusation. Catherine stood by the window, hands trembling against the glass. You've ruined us, she said softly, and that was worse than if she'd screamed. Her husband, Richard Bowmont, entered behind her, his boots heavy on the marble. He did not look at me when he spoke. She cannot stay here, he said. The Whitmore name is fragile enough. They spoke of me as though I weren't there, as though madness had already erased my body. An asylum in Columbia, they said. Treatment, privacy, silence, I begged. I promised calm. I swore the laughter would never return. But decisions in Bowmont were made for comfort, not for truth. That night, through the thin walls, I heard them argue. Catherine's voice cracked with pride and fear. She is my sister. Richard's reply was ice. She is a liability. By morning, the decision was made. No carriages would come for me. No doctors would write my name. My sister had found a quieter place to bury her shame. A place behind the grand house where songs replaced sermons and names were whispered, not written. 1857. One laugh. One label. One door closing. If one sentence could save lives but ruin yours. Would you speak it? The morning I was sent away, the sky hung low and colorless, as if it too were ashamed. Catherine would not meet my eyes. Her pale blue gown brushed the gravel like frost over ash. You'll stay in the quarters for now, she said quickly. Until I can arrange something better. But her voice trembled on that word better. I already knew it meant never. A driver led me down a narrow path that split the cotton fields like a scar. Each turn of the wagon wheels carried me farther from silk and crystal, and closer to the truth our family had buried beneath them. The smell changed first. Perfume giving way to sweat, wood smoke, earth, and boiled corn. Then came the sound, soft voices humming in rhythm with the wind. The cabins appeared, small and crooked, standing shoulder to shoulder like survivors after a storm. Catherine followed behind, careful not to step in the red dust. When we stopped, she called out, "Patience!" A woman emerged from a doorway. She wore a faded calico dress, her bare feet dusted in clay, her eyes alive with a knowing that needed no permission. "Yes, Miss Catherine?" "This is Eleanor," my sister said, swallowing the name as though it burned her tongue. "She's a poor white woman I've hired to help in the fields. She'll stay with you. Teach her what's needed." Patience's gaze brushed me like a mirror. She saw everything. My soft hands, my trembling posture, the lie wrapped in Catherine's tone. But she only nodded. "Yes, ma'am? We'll take care of her." Catherine turned to leave. "Eleanor," she said, her back to me, "remember, you're to speak of nothing before today." Then she was gone, the rustle of silk fading into bird song and distance. Patience guided me toward a cabin that smelled of smoke and herbs. Inside, the light was honey-colored and dim. 3 faces looked up. Mercy, gray-haired and gentle-eyed, stirring a pot of corn mush. Grace, young and quiet, her belly round beneath her dress. And a small boy, barefoot, playing with a stick in the dust. "This'll be your place," Mercy said softly, spreading a thin blanket on the floor. It ain't much, but it keeps the night off. I tried to thank her, but the words tangled in my throat. That night, lying on the hard earth, I listened to the breathing around me, slow, weary, and human. Outside, the frogs sang by the marsh, and from far across the fields came a hymn, steal away home. It rose through the darkness like smoke through the ribs of the world. I understood none of the words, yet every note felt like truth pressing against my chest. Days became a blur of blisters and sun. My fingers tore. My back ached. The overseer's horse snorted like thunder. But in the quiet moments, when patience bound my hands in plant leaves, when mercy whispered stories of healing, when grace smiled despite her fear, I began to feel something I hadn't known in years, belonging without pretense. One evening, as the sun dyed red over the cotton rows, Patience said, "You listen close, Miss Eleanor. Out here we talk soft, but we remember loud. Freedom starts small, like a whisper that won't die." And for the first time I whispered back, "Then teach me to listen." 1857. One cabin. One lesson. One family found in the dark. When the world threw you away. Who caught you? Weeks passed. The body learns what pride forgets. I rose before dawn, ate from a wooden bowl, bent over the cotton until my thoughts became rhythm. Pick, drop, breathe. Pain stopped being punishment. It became proof I still existed. By then I had learned the unwritten rules of survival. Keep your eyes low. Move steady. Speak only when safe. But madness, or truth, has a way of returning when you least expect it. It was near noon, the sun white as judgment. Briggs, the overseer, rode along the rows with his whip coiled at his side. A field hand stumbled, too weary to rise fast enough. Briggs raised his arm, and then something in me snapped. "Stop!" I shouted. The words split the air like thunder. Every head turned. Even the wind paused. He swung toward me. "Who told you to speak, girl?" My heart pounded like a drum inside a cage. "I told you," I said. "And my name isn't Girl. It's Eleanor Whitmore, sister to Catherine Bowmont." The field fell silent. For a heartbeat, even the cicadas forgot to sing. Briggs's face twisted with disbelief, then cold amusement. He gripped my arm so hard the skin burned. "We'll see what your sister says about that." He dragged me toward the big house, the others watching in frozen terror. I could see their thoughts. She's lost her mind. And she's going to get us all punished. Catherine was in the parlor, embroidery in hand, pretending peace. When she saw me, the color drained from her face. Briggs spoke first. "She claims she's your kin, ma'am. Says her name's Whitmore." The pause that followed felt like eternity folding in on itself. Catherine's eyes met mine, and for one heartbeat I saw the girl she'd been. Then the mask returned. "She's mad," she said quietly. "Delusional. I hired her out of pity. She often claims to be related to families of standing. It's part of her illness." The words struck harder than any whip. My own sister's denial. Clean, practiced, absolute. Briggs smirked, satisfied. That's all I needed to know. He pulled me from the room. I didn't fight. There are some betrayals you don't meet with anger. Only silence. That night I sat on the dirt floor of the cabin, shaking. Patience knelt beside me, eyes sharp in the candlelight. "We heard what you said," she whispered. "It's true, ain't it?" "She really your blood?" I nodded. Tears came, hot and soundless. "She threw you away," Mercy murmured. "Your own kin. You understand now what we've always known." Patience leaned close. "You got something she don't, knowledge. You've seen her world, heard their talk, read their letters, use it. Make it mean something." The words hung in the air like an oath forming from smoke. I looked around at the faces in the half-light. These women who owed me nothing, who had fed me, healed me, seen me at my lowest. They were my truest family now. If Catherine called me mad, then madness would be my disguise, and my weapon. I would use my sister's own world to undo her power. I would turn the quiet of the quarters into the sound of reckoning. That night, I whispered to the dark, "No more silence." The stars above the pines seemed to tremble in agreement. 57. One denial. One vow, one pen against a plantation. Is justice worth burning the last bridge to home? The days grew long and heavy, the sky pressing down like a lid over the cotton fields. Summer in South Carolina feels less like weather and more like a sentence. The air itself punishes you for breathing. Each dawn I walked with the others to the Rose, but my mind no longer lived there. It moved through the big house, through ledgers and letters, learning its rhythm, finding its weaknesses. Catherine thought I was broken. Richard thought I was beneath notice. Both were right enough to be careless, and that was all I needed. At night, when my mind raced too fast for sleep, I began to wander. If anyone saw me, I blamed it on madness. "Poor thing," they'd whisper. "She don't even know where she is." That lie became my lantern. I learned that Richard kept his study unlocked after midnight. Inside were drawers of ink-stained secrets, unpaid bills, bank letters, debt notes sealed with trembling hands. I copied them by candlelight, tracing his signature until I could mimic it stroke for stroke. Soon I was forging more than his name. I was forging our revenge. By August, the house servants trusted me enough to whisper after dark. Sarah, the young woman who poured Catherine's tea, carried a sorrow she couldn't hide. She was carrying Richard's child. He visited her cabin in secret, calling it God's will, when everyone knew it was power-wearing piety's mask. Catherine pretended not to notice, but her eyes had that glassy stillness of someone who already knew and could not bear the knowing. Patience said softly, "That's the kind of truth that can break a house." And she was right. We began to meet after lights out when the moon rose white over the pines. 12 of us huddled in the shadows between cabins. Patience kept watch. Mercy brought herbs to calm nerves and treat fevers. Grace listened with both hands resting on her belly. I spread stolen papers across the dirt floor. "These are his debts," I whispered. "He owes more than he owns. One rumor in Charleston will ruin him." I showed them forged passes, written in Richard's hand, granting travel for household errands. "If you walk with purpose, no one will question it." Grace's voice trembled. "You mean, we could walk out of here?" "Not all at once," I said. "Small groups. One night, one moon." Patience looked at me with that calm fire of hers. "And what about you?" "I stay," I told her. "They already think I'm crazy. Let them. I can draw their eyes while you run." For weeks we prepared in silence. Every small act became sacred. Mercy traded herbs for scraps of food to pack for the journey. Patience sewed hidden pockets into skirts for coins and maps. I wrote careful letters to abolitionists in Charleston and Columbia, disguised as notes to doctors about my condition. Each line carried coordinates, warnings, hope. The nights thickened with thunder. Even the cicadas fell quiet, as if the world itself was waiting. One evening, lightning flashed across the horizon, the signal we had agreed upon. The storm would mask footsteps and voices. The air smelled of metal and promise. In the cabin, Grace whispered, "It feels like stealing the sun." And perhaps it was. We were taking what had been stolen from them, light, life, freedom, and claiming it back under a sky split by fire. I moved through the quarters, passing each small bundle, each trembling hand. "North," I told them. "Follow the river until you see the crooked pine. Then head east until you find the blue bottle tree. That's a safe house. Trust no one who smiles too easily." Patience touched my arm. "If we make it, we'll send word." I nodded, unable to speak. When the rain finally broke, they slipped into the night one by one, their figures vanishing between flashes of lightning. By dawn, Beaumont's fields were empty in places they had never been before. The next days passed in uneasy quiet. Catherine noticed only that the picking went slower. Richard raged about lost labor but blamed the storm. They never suspected me. After all, what threat could a mad woman pose? But my work wasn't done. The world had to know what they were, and it would by their own hands. I began sending letters, unsigned, elegant, each written in my best imitation of Charleston gossip. One to a banker. "Mr. Beaumont's accounts appear. Steady." Another to a preacher. "A sin festers in the house of a so-called Christian." And finally, one to a friend of Catherine's. "Pity poor Sarah. The servant heavy with her master's shame." Each envelope was a fuse, each whisper a spark. Bowmont Plantation was a house of cotton, and I had given the wind its match. Nights in the cabin changed. We sang softer now, not of sorrow but of waiting. Every voice carried a secret pride. Somewhere beyond the swamp, 12 souls were walking free. Their absence was a wound that bled light instead of darkness. Patience would smile at me sometimes and say, "You done started something that can't be stopped." "Miss Eleanor," and in her voice was both blessing and warning, the storm had begun, and none of us could unmake it now. 57, one inkwell, one map, one midnight chosen. If freedom came at midnight, would you run? By September, the air itself seemed to tremble with secrets. Storm clouds gathered above Bowmont, though the fields stood dry. Inside the big house, thunder had already begun, only no one heard it yet. The first letter struck quietly. A banker from Charleston arrived, hat in hand, voice too polite for comfort. He spoke to Richard in low tones behind the study doors, while Catherine poured tea that no one drank. Later I saw Richard's hand shake as he signed something, his quill splattering ink like dark rain. The second letter came 2 days later, this one to the Reverend Harlan, hinting that the Bowmont's Christian reputation had rotted beneath its lace. Sunday came and went with no invitation to service. Catherine stayed home that day, staring at the garden as if the roses had turned against her. Then came the final one, the letter about Sarah. Written in my neatest script, sealed with wax, and delivered by a courier who never asked questions. It arrived on a gray morning while mist still clung to the magnolias. I was weeding near the veranda when I heard the scream. It tore through the house, sharp, furious, broken. Catherine's voice. I crept closer. Through the window I saw her standing, letter crushed in her fist, eyes wild with disbelief. "You vile man," she shouted. "With her? With a slave? And she carries your child?" Her voice cracked under the weight of it. "You've destroyed us, Richard." He tried to calm her, his words low and pleading, but her fury had no bottom. "You brought shame into this house," she cried. "Into my name." The argument rolled through the rooms like thunder across the plains. China shattered, doors slammed, servants froze where they stood. For once, the house that lived on other people's silence was filled with sound. By afternoon, word had spread from the kitchen to the fields. The Bowmonts were finished. The overseer whispered to the coachman. The coachman told the washerwomen. The story moved faster than wind over cotton. When Catherine finally stepped outside at dusk, her face was ghost pale, her eyes rimmed in red. She spotted me near the steps. For a moment I thought she might fall to her knees, but pride held her spine straight. "You," she hissed. "This is your doing." I said nothing. The truth didn't need my voice anymore. She advanced, trembling. "You think you can destroy me? You're nothing. You're mad." Behind her, the last light of day turned the house windows to molten gold, as if the sun itself wanted to watch her fall. Patience appeared from the shadows, standing quietly at my side. So did Mercy. Then Grace, her hands folded over her belly. One by one, others emerged. The ones who had lived under Catherine's rule, now witnesses to its unraveling. "You called me mad," I said softly. "But madness sees what manners hide." Catherine's lip quivered. "You'll pay for this." "No," I whispered. "You already are." For a long moment she just stood there, a lady made of porcelain, cracking from within. Then she turned and stumbled back toward the big house, where the chandeliers no longer shone, only flickered. That night, lightning danced over the fields. The rain fell hard and fast, washing the dust from every roof, every path, every secret. By dawn, Bowmont's grandeur looked smaller, as though the land itself had decided to forget it. 57. One letter. One scream. One mask finally cracks. Would you have confronted them in the open? The air before dawn felt carved from glass. Even the cicadas had fallen silent, as if the world were holding its breath. Tomorrow, Bowmont would be sold. Every acre, every life, every memory turned into numbers on a page. But tonight, 12 souls prepared to rewrite those numbers in their own hand. In the cabin, the fire burned low, the light licking the edges of the maps we'd drawn in dirt. Patience knelt beside them, tracing routes with her fingertip. "Follow the creek till the water smells of iron," she whispered. Then east toward the pine ridge. "The crooked tree'll point you north." Mercy checked the small bundles of dried herbs and cornbread, muttering prayers older than this land. Grace sat quietly in the corner, one hand on her swollen belly, the other clutching a small wooden cross carved from scrap wood. Her eyes shone like someone seeing both tomorrow and forever. I had spent the day forging final passes, signing Richard's name with the precision of months of practice. Each line was a thread in the web we had spun through lies and courage. By the time I finished, my fingers were stained with ink and trembling with fear. Patience looked at me. "You should come with us," I shook my head. "If I vanish the same night as you, they'll know. They'll hunt harder. They'll kill you if you stay. Maybe, but if I'm here, I can mislead them. I can make them chase shadows instead of you." Mercy pressed a small pouch into my palm. Plantain, comfrey, a bit of willow bark. "In case they hurt you again." Her hand lingered on mine, warm and certain. I could not find words big enough to hold my gratitude. Outside, the sky was bleeding toward black blue. The first stars flickered like signals between worlds. A breeze lifted through the pines, carrying the smell of rain and freedom. We stepped out together, 12 figures moving like one thought. The earth was soft from the afternoon storm. It muffled our steps. Every shadow looked like a watcher, every rustle a question. At the edge of the field, Patience turned to me. "If we make it," she whispered, "we'll send word. You'll know it's from us if it's tied with a blue ribbon." I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. Grace reached out and squeezed my hand. "Tell my child," she said, "that we left so she could be born free." Then she smiled, and small, steady, eternal, and disappeared into the trees. One by one. They melted into the dark until I could see only movement, then nothing. The night swallowed them whole. Only their footsteps remained, soft dents in the pine needles that glistened like tears. I stayed there long after they were gone, listening to the wind. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a whip-poor-will called, 3 notes, low and mournful. I whispered back, "Go, go, go." When the first hint of gray touched the horizon, I walked back alone. My footprints overlapped theirs, blurring the trail. By daylight, I'd appear to be the only one who had wandered. Back at the cabin, I hid the last forged papers under the hearthstone and sat down by the dying fire. My body trembled, but my heart was still. Whatever happened now, the chain had cracked. The first sound of freedom had been made, and nothing could unmake it. I closed my eyes and prayed, not to the God of marble churches, but to the one who heard songs through the cotton wind. "Guide them north," I whispered. "And if I must fall, let it buy them 1 more mile. Cutting 37, 1 path north. 1 decoy south, 1 breath held till dawn. Who would you trust with your life in the dark?" The morning of the auction dawned with a silence so sharp it hurt to breathe. Even the roosters seemed ashamed to call out. Mist clung to the fields like a shroud, turning the cotton rows into pale ghosts. By noon, Bowmont would belong to someone else. By nightfall, so would the people who had built it. I was herded to the front yard with the others, hands bound not by rope, but by expectation. Men in coats and tall hats milled about, chewing tobacco and murmuring bids. To them this was commerce. To us it was inventory. Chalk marks covered everything, crates, plows, cattle, children. Each mark meant for sale. Even the house had one scrawled across its white column. Lot 1. I remember thinking how strange it was that a single word could erase an entire family's pride. Catherine stood near the veranda, her dress plain now, her hair uncurled. Beside her, Richard looked hollowed out, a man carved from debt and gin. They didn't speak to each other. They didn't need to. Ruin has its own language. The auctioneer climbed his platform, his voice loud and cheerful as though he were blessing a feast. 1 fine mare, he called. Then 3 dairy cows. Then a skilled cook named Mercy. My heart clenched. Mercy stepped forward, calm as sunrise. She didn't look back at me. She looked up, as if memorizing the sky for the journey ahead. Patience followed next, sold to a plantation miles away. Grace, heavy with child, was listed with unborn issue, a phrase that made the buyers nod as though they were discussing livestock. I wanted to scream, but my voice felt buried beneath the weight of centuries. When my name was called, it sounded strange. Ellen Whitmire, the clerk misread, scribbling in his ledger. No one cared to correct it. A man stepped forward. Thomas Hartwell from Virginia. He was older, neatly dressed, spectacles perched on his nose. He looked at me not with cruelty but with curiosity, like someone examining an artifact from a forgotten ruin. $300, he offered. A murmur went through the crowd. Too high for a poor white woman fallen among slaves. But he didn't flinch. The gavel came down. Sold, Catherine's gaze found mine across the yard. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The wind tugged her skirt, carrying away the perfume that used to fill whole rooms. She looked smaller now, a figure painted in sorrow instead of silk. And then beneath all that bitterness I saw it, regret. Thin as breath, but real. I smiled. Not cruelly, but the way one smiles at a grave finely marked. It was not triumph. It was closure. As Hartwell signed his papers, I turned toward the crowd. Around me, the yard swirled with motion. Carriages loading furniture, wagons creaking under trunks, babies crying for mothers already sold away. The white columns of Bowmont rose behind it all, empty now, stripped of pretense. The house that had hidden me, fed me, buried me alive, was being dismantled piece by piece. When we left the grounds, I did not look back. I didn't need to. The past was still burning, even without flame. I carried its ashes inside me. A reminder, a promise. On the wagon north, the driver asked if I was frightened. No, I said quietly. Fear belongs to those who still have something to lose. And as the wheels turned, I felt the world shift beneath me. Beaumont was gone, but the story it tried to silence had already found its voice. When 57 won gavel, one price. One chapter ends, another begins. If your past stood across the yard, would you nod? Or turn away? The road to Virginia was long and gray, lined with bare trees that looked like they were reaching for something just out of sight. I rode in the back of a wagon beside a trunk that rattled with every stone. No one spoke. Silence is the first rule of the traded. Thomas Hartwell, my new master, was not like Richard Beaumont. He did not raise his voice or strike without cause. He spoke softly, the way men do when they have read too many books and not enough hearts. To him, I was an oddity, a white woman fallen from her own kind, a curiosity to manage rather than a person to break. He placed me in the main house, among the servants who polished brass and tended lamps. My duties were light, writing his letters, teaching his nephew to read, keeping accounts. It was easier work than cotton, yet harder on the soul, for idleness leaves space for memory. Every night I thought of the 12 shadows who had vanished into the pine woods. Did they reach the crooked tree? Did the bottle tree still shimmer in moonlight? Did Grace's child cry her first breath in freedom? Then one cold morning a letter arrived. No sender's name, only a blue ribbon tied at the seal. My hands trembled as I untied it. Inside were just 6 words written in Patience's careful hand. We made it. Grace's baby is free. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and lilac. I pressed it to my chest and felt something inside me unclench for the first time in months. After that, I began to write again, not for Hartwell's business, but for the living network pulsing beneath the country's surface. I used invisible ink made from lemon juice, the words appearing only under heat. Each page carried directions, safe names, warnings about patrols. I slipped them into the outgoing mail between the planters' invitations and invoices. If caught, they would call it treason. I called it tithing. Hartwell noticed my restlessness but mistook it for melancholy. Books will help, he said kindly, handing me a worn volume of Psalms. I smiled and thanked him. He never guessed the Psalms hid my maps. Weeks blurred into seasons. The tobacco fields turned from green to gold to gray. The war that everyone whispered about had not yet begun, but the wind smelled of it. Men talked of secession, of honor, of property, words that felt like old chains polished to shine. Another letter came that spring, carried north to south through secret hands. Mercy wrote of a small clinic in Philadelphia, where she treated mothers and newborns, free both in body and in spirit. Patience was teaching letters to those who had never been allowed to see their own names written down. Grace had named her daughter Eleanor. I read that line again and again until the ink blurred. For the first time since Beaumont, I felt forgiven, not by God, but by the living. At night, I would stand at my window watching the river reflect the moon like a path of silver bars. Each glimmer felt like a promise. Freedom travels quietly, but it travels. 1859, one river, one network, one promise kept across states. Would you risk everything twice for the same freedom? The winter of 1859 came colder than any I could remember. Even the river seemed to move slower, thick with ice and secrets. By then, I had helped more souls than I could count slip through the cracks of the South. But the heart keeps track, even when ledgers cannot. Then word reached me of a raid in Virginia, John Brown at Harper's Ferry, and I knew the country's patience had ended. Freedom was no longer a whisper. It was thunder breaking through stone. That same night, I gathered my final maps and letters. This time, it would not be 12. It would be 23. We moved like ghosts, families from nearby plantations, couples carrying children bundled in rags. Each name burned itself into my memory. Samuel, Ruth, Daniel, Hope. The night air cut through our lungs, but no one stopped. Every step north was a prayer the earth seemed to echo back. When dawn came, the bells rang, not for worship, but alarm. The plantations awoke to find the fields empty, the overseers shouted. The hounds were unleashed. But by the time they reached the riverbank, we were gone. The footprints we left glowed faintly in the frost, 23 marks on the world that could never be erased. 3 days later, they found me, sheriff's men pounding on Hartwell's door, their boots shaking the floorboards. There was no proof, only suspicion. But suspicion was enough. At the trial, they called me many things, madwoman, traitor, liar. I stood there, pale and calm, and said, I helped human beings claim what was already theirs. If that is madness, then may the world never be sane again. The judge's gavel fell like thunder. I was sentenced to prison, but I walked out taller than I had ever stood at Bowmont. Because for the first time, every chain around me was made of truth. 1864. One cell. One voice. One legend carried by the wind. Would you forgive a confession written too late? If it freed others first? The years that followed blurred like ink left out in the rain. War came, devoured sons and harvests alike. And when it was done, the chains of the South lay scattered like old iron bones. I walked free again, older, thinner, my hands still marked by the ghosts of the fields. They called it peace, but peace is only freedom learning to breathe. In Washington, I served as a nurse. My ward smelled of carbolic and courage, soldiers in blue and brown, the wounded and the freed, all learning what it meant to rebuild a nation that had torn itself apart. Among them were men who had once been bound like I was, now wearing Union coats in quiet pride. They called me Miss Whitmore, but in their eyes I saw something deeper, sister. One spring evening, as the cherry trees bloomed pink against the gray hospitals, I received my last letter. It came from Philadelphia, written in Patience's hand. Grace's daughter, Eleanor Grace Thompson, had just graduated from a school built for freed children. She was to become a teacher, spreading light where we had once whispered in darkness. Patience ended the letter simply. We carry you in every word we write. I folded it carefully and set it beneath my pillow. That night, as my breath grew faint, I felt their voices singing somewhere beyond the walls, hymns of river crossings, of names once forbidden but now spoken aloud. And when my eyes closed, I saw them all. Mercy, grace, patience, walking across fields no longer owned by anyone. When they laid me to rest, my marker read E. Whitmore, abolitionist, 1832-1865. But I like to think the wind carries another inscription. She remembered what love was and set it free. One life, one legacy, one name the wind won't erase. If her story moved you, share it so their silence never returns. Subscribe and help history keep its voice alive.